Marcus Chin stood at the window of the Arctic Research Station, watching the snow fall in thick, heavy waves. He had been alone here for 3 years now and he liked it that way. The cold didn't bother him anymore. After 20 years in the military, fighting in hot deserts and wet jungles, the frozen Arctic felt like peace. He was 52 years old, tired and done with the world. His job was simple. He monitored climate data, fixed equipment when it broke, and sent reports to the main office in Canada every week. Nobody visited. Nobody called. The station stood on a massive sheet of ice near the North Pole, surrounded by nothing but white and silence. This was exactly what Marcus wanted. He had seen enough death and violence in his life. Here there was only the sound of wind and ice. But today was different. Marcus was drinking his morning coffee when the alarm on his computer started beeping. The thermal sensors around the station had detected something unusual. Heat signatures. Big ones. They were moving through a ravine about 2 kilometers away from the station. Marcus frowned. There were no animals large enough to create heat signatures that size in the Arctic. And there were certainly no human settlements near here. He checked the readings again. 5 separate heat sources, each one as large as a truck, moving slowly through the snow. But that didn't make sense. The sensors showed they were extremely hot, much hotter than any animal should be. Marcus rubbed his tired eyes. Maybe the sensors were broken. It happened sometimes in this cold. He decided to investigate. It was foolish, maybe, but Marcus had learned to trust his instincts during his military days. Those instincts had kept him alive through countless dangerous situations. He put on his heavy winter gear, grabbed his emergency pack, and stepped out into the freezing wind. The walk to the ravine took 40 minutes. Marcus moved carefully across the ice, testing each step. The temperature was -40 degrees, cold enough to freeze exposed skin in minutes. He kept his face covered and his eyes narrow against the wind. As he got closer to the ravine, he noticed something strange. The snow around him was melting. There were small puddles of water, which was impossible in this temperature. Then he saw them. Marcus stopped walking. He couldn't move. He couldn't even breathe properly for a moment. 3 massive creatures lay in the ravine below him. They were unlike anything he had ever seen. They looked like dragons from old stories, but they were made of something that sparkled like crystal or glass. Their bodies were enormous, each one as long as a city bus. Their skin shimmered with colors that seemed to shift and change, moving from blue to purple to green and back again. They had long necks, powerful wings, and tails that stretched far across the snowy ground. Thick ice covered parts of their bodies, but the ice seemed to be melting wherever their skin touched it. One of the creatures lifted its head. It saw Marcus standing on the ridge above it. Marcus expected to feel fear. He had faced many dangerous situations in his life, and fear was usually the first thing he felt. But now, looking at this impossible creature, Marcus felt something different. He felt sadness. The dragon made a sound. It was not a roar or a shriek. It was more like music, a deep harmonic vibration that seemed to come from inside the earth itself. The sound was sad and tired and desperate all at once. The dragon lowered its massive head to the ground in a strange gesture, almost like it was bowing. Then it made the sound again. The other 2 dragons moved slightly. One of them was larger than the others and had scales that glowed bright silver. The other was smaller and seemed to be struggling more than the rest. Both of them were covered in thick ice and their movements were slow and painful. They were dying. Marcus could see it clearly. These creatures were freezing to death, even though they seemed to produce heat. Marcus had seen dying soldiers before. He knew what death looked like. He knew the smell and the sound and the way a living thing slowly stopped fighting. That was what he saw in these creatures. They were fighting to survive, but they were losing. Without thinking much about what he was doing, Marcus started sliding down the side of the ravine. His feet slipped on the ice, but he kept moving toward the creatures. They watched him approach. They did not move to attack him. They simply watched with eyes that seemed intelligent and full of fear. When Marcus got close enough, he could feel the heat coming from their bodies. It was intense, like standing near a fire. But it was not a comfortable heat. It was a desperate, struggling heat, the kind of heat that came from a body trying to survive in an environment that was trying to kill it. The smaller dragon made a soft sound. It was quieter than the first sound, almost like a whisper. The dragon's scales were a light blue color, and they seemed to be dimming, losing their shine. Marcus understood, somehow, that this dragon was the most sick of the 3. He reached out his hand, slowly, carefully. He was thinking about his time in the military, about learning to understand danger and threat. This creature could kill him easily. One swing of its tail could break his bones. But Marcus was almost certain it would not. Something in the way the dragon moved, the way it made those sad musical sounds, told Marcus that this creature was not a threat. It was asking for help. Marcus turned away from the dragons and looked back at the research station in the distance. He could just barely see it through the snow and wind. That station had everything he needed: heating systems, shelter, power, equipment. It had been designed to protect humans from the harsh Arctic environment. But Marcus had a new idea now. He looked back at the three creatures. They were watching him. Waiting. In the extreme cold of the Arctic, surrounded by ice and snow and wind, something impossible was happening. A tired old soldier was about to change the course of human history. But he did not know it yet. He only knew that these creatures needed help and he could provide it. Marcus made his decision. He would shelter them. Marcus moved quickly back to the research station. His mind was working fast, calculating what he needed to do. The three dragons could not survive much longer in the Arctic cold. They needed shelter and they needed it immediately. The station's geothermal heating system was designed to warm the entire facility using heat from deep beneath the earth. Marcus had studied the plans when he first arrived. He knew every pipe, every valve, every circuit in the building. When he got back inside, Marcus went straight to the basement level where the main heating chamber was located. It was a massive underground room about the size of a warehouse. The room was kept at a comfortable temperature by hot water pipes that ran through the walls. The station's engineers had designed it as a backup shelter in case of extreme emergencies. Marcus had never thought he would actually use it for anything. He began his work immediately. First, he rerouted several of the main heating pipes to increase the temperature in the chamber. He adjusted the flow valves, checking the readings on his portable instruments. Next, he created thick insulating barriers using emergency supplies stored in the station. He hung heavy blankets and reflective materials on the walls to help keep the heat inside. He even found old thermal insulation panels left over from the station's construction and fitted them into place. It took Marcus 8 hours of hard work, but he created a space that was warm and safe. The temperature in the chamber rose to 40 degrees, warm enough for survival but not so hot that it would damage delicate systems. Then Marcus made a decision that would end his quiet life forever. He walked to the communications room and disabled the external communication system. He also blocked the satellite uplink that would have automatically sent his location data to the main office in Canada. If he was going to help these creatures, nobody could know about it yet. Marcus drove one of the station's emergency snowmobiles back to the ravine. The three dragons were still there, but they seemed even weaker than before. Their colors were dimmer. Their breathing was slower. Marcus made soft sounds and gestures, trying to show them that he meant no harm. The larger silver dragon lifted its head first. It looked at Marcus with eyes that seemed very intelligent. Then it slowly stood up. The movement was difficult. The dragon's legs were stiff from the cold. Ice fell from its body in large chunks. But the creature managed to rise. The other two dragons followed, struggling but determined. Marcus led them slowly back to the station. The walk that had taken him 40 minutes on foot took much longer with the dragons, but eventually they reached the facility. When the dragons entered the heated chamber, they made sounds that Marcus had never heard before. These sounds were different from the sad, desperate noises they had made in the ravine. These sounds seemed almost like joy. They were warm, musical tones that echoed through the room. The dragons moved slowly around the space, feeling the heat on their crystalline skin. Their colors began to brighten. Their breathing became deeper and less strained. Over the next 3 days the dragons recovered slowly. Marcus brought them water and food, though he was not sure what dragons ate. He tried fish first and they seemed to ignore it. He tried meat and they showed more interest but did not eat much. Then he realized something. These creatures produced their own internal heat. Maybe they did not need to eat very often, or maybe they needed something different entirely. Marcus spent hours watching them. He noticed that their scales seemed to absorb energy from any light source in the room. When he turned up the lights they seemed more active. When he dimmed them, the dragons became sluggish. He began to wonder if these creatures got energy from light itself like plants. On the 4th day something remarkable happened. Marcus was sitting in the heated chamber, watching the smallest dragon, when the creature made a series of musical sounds. The sounds were rhythmic and seemed almost intentional, like the dragon was trying to communicate something. Marcus had an old translation program on his laptop, originally designed for theoretical first contact situations. He had never expected to use it. Out of curiosity, he recorded the dragon's sounds and fed them into the program. The computer processed the information for several minutes. Then words began to appear on the screen. The translation was rough and incomplete, but it was something. Help, need, home gun, danger, follow, thank. Marcus stared at the screen. His hands were shaking slightly. These creatures were not mindless beasts. They were intelligent. They were trying to communicate with him. He quickly set up a better recording system and continued listening to the dragon's sounds. Over the next 12 hours, the translation program became more accurate. The dragons were teaching the computer their language as they made their sounds. Slowly, Marcus began to understand their story. These creatures called themselves Valorians. They came from a world far away, a world that was dying. Something had gone wrong there, something that created a rift in space itself. This rift was destroying their planet, consuming it piece by piece. The dragons were refugees, the last survivors of their kind. They had escaped in a small ship and traveled through space for years, searching for a safe place to hide. They had chosen Earth because they had detected radio signals decades ago. In those signals, they had found examples of human art, music, and stories. They had studied how humans treated each other, how humans sometimes showed kindness even to strangers. The Valorians had made a calculation, a mathematical prediction based on human behavior. They had decided that humans might be the only species in the galaxy who would help them without asking for payment or power. The smallest dragon, the one Marcus had named Iris, made a series of sounds that the computer translated as, "You held weapon away. You showed no fear anger. You chose help. This is why we came to your world." Marcus felt tears in his eyes. He was a soldier. He had been trained to kill. He had seen and done terrible things in his life. But this alien creature, this dragon from a dying world, believed that humans were good. This creature believed that Marcus himself was good. It had bet its survival on that belief. Marcus made a promise to himself in that moment. He would protect these creatures. No matter what happened, he would keep them safe. The consequences did not matter anymore. Nothing mattered except helping these impossible beings who had trusted him with their lives. On the 5th day, everything changed. Marcus was in the communications room, reviewing the translated conversations with the dragons, when an alarm suddenly began to scream. It was a sound he had not heard in years. It was the external threat detection system. Something was approaching the station from space. Marcus ran to the main console and checked the readings. His face went pale. 3 massive objects were descending through the atmosphere toward the station. They were not meteors or satellites. They were ships. Military ships. And their energy signatures were completely different from anything Marcus had seen before. His hands moved across the keyboard without conscious thought, the muscle memory from his military days taking over. He activated every scanner and sensor the station possessed. Data flooded across the screens. The ships were large, heavily armed, and they were moving toward the Arctic station with clear purpose and speed. Then a communication signal came through. Marcus opened the channel. A harsh, metallic voice filled the room. It was not quite human, but it was speaking English, though with a strange accent that made the words sound wrong and threatening. "Research Station, this is Commander Vex of the Krenethi Fleet. You are harboring fugitive Valerian entities. You will surrender them immediately, or we will destroy your facility and everything in it. You have 10 minutes to comply." Marcus felt his heart beating hard in his chest. The Krenethi. He had heard the dragons mention this name with fear in their musical voices. The Krenethi were hunters. They were warriors. They were the reason the Valorians had fled across space in the first place. Marcus knew immediately that surrender was not a real option. The Krenethi commander would take the dragons and probably kill everyone who had helped them. This was not a situation where negotiation would work. This was a situation where only action mattered. He ran down to the heated chamber where the 3 dragons rested. Iris looked up at him with those intelligent eyes. The dragon made a questioning sound. Marcus did not need the translation program to understand that Iris was asking what was happening. "We have to leave," Marcus said quickly. "The hunters have found us. We need to go. Now." The dragons understood the urgency in his voice. They began to move, though they were still weak from their long journey and recovery. Marcus helped them stand, supporting their weight as they struggled to their feet. He led them quickly through the station's corridors toward the lowest level of the facility. Deep beneath the station, in the very foundation of the building, there was a room that most people had forgotten about. It was called the Emergency Launch Chamber. It had been built into the station's design 40 years ago, back when Arctic research stations were supposed to have evacuation capabilities. A small spacecraft sat inside the chamber, designed to carry emergency personnel away from the station if disaster struck. Marcus had discovered it during his first week at the station and had studied its systems out of curiosity. He had never expected to use it. "Get inside," Marcus told the dragons, gesturing toward the ship. The largest dragon, the silver one, hesitated. It made a series of sounds that the computer translated as, You come with us. You help us escape. Marcus shook his head. His military training had taught him many things, including how to recognize a situation where sacrifice was necessary. Someone had to stay behind. Someone had to keep the Krenathi distracted long enough for the dragons to escape. I will follow, Marcus lied. He did not know if the dragons would believe him, but he said it anyway. You have to go now. I will delay them. The dragons moved into the small spacecraft, their massive bodies barely fitting through the entrance. Marcus quickly uploaded the station's entire database onto the ship's computer. He included star charts, scientific information, and everything he could think of about human culture, history, and art. The dragons had come to Earth hoping to find a refuge. If they survived this, they would need to know about the world they had chosen. Marcus also recorded a message. He explained who he was, what he had done, and why he had helped the dragons. He recorded everything about the Valorian situation and their need for protection. Then he set the coordinates for a distant human space station, one of Earth's furthest outposts. Maybe, just maybe, the dragons could reach it and explain their situation to humans who had authority. Go, Marcus said to the dragons. What? Tell your story. Find safety. Iris made a sad sound, almost like a song of farewell. The dragon reached out one of its claws and gently touched Marcus's shoulder. Then the spacecraft's doors began to seal. Marcus ran back through the station. He went to the control room and started activating every system he could think of. He sent false signals in multiple directions, creating confusion about which way the spacecraft had gone. He rerouted power to create energy signatures in the wrong places. He used every trick his military mind could devise. Then he went to the reactor chamber. He carefully calculated how to cause a controlled rupture in the reactor's containment system. It was an extremely dangerous procedure, but Marcus had learned how to do things like this during his military training. If he did it correctly, the rupture would create a massive electromagnetic pulse. The pulse would not destroy the station, but it would temporarily disable all electronic systems in a wide radius. Marcus initiated the procedure. Alarms began screaming throughout the facility. The electromagnetic pulse exploded outward from the reactor like an invisible wave of energy. Outside, the three Krenathi ships suddenly went dark. Their weapons went offline. Their targeting systems failed. Their navigation computers crashed. In that moment of chaos and darkness, the small emergency spacecraft launched from beneath the ice. It rose into the Arctic sky and accelerated toward space, carrying 3 Valerian dragons toward an uncertain future. Marcus watched the sensors until they showed the spacecraft was safely away. Then he sat in the control room and waited. He knew what would happen next. The Krenathi would recover their systems. They would realize they had been deceived. And they would come for him. But that did not matter anymore. The dragons were safe. That was all that mattered. The electromagnetic pulse lasted only a few minutes, but it was enough. The small spacecraft carrying the 3 dragons climbed higher and higher into the Arctic sky. Behind them, the Krenathi ships were still recovering their systems. The dragon's ship was fast, faster than anything the Arctic station could produce. It had been designed for one purpose only: escape. Inside the spacecraft, the 3 Valorians felt the acceleration pushing against their crystalline bodies. Iris looked back at the small planet they were leaving behind. She made a series of musical sounds that the computer translated into sadness and gratitude. Marcus Chin had sacrificed everything for them. The old human soldier had given them the only gift that mattered. He had given them time. The ship's navigation system came online. The dragons had programmed it with coordinates long before they ever landed on Earth. They were heading toward a human space station called Nexus Station 7, one of the furthest human outposts from Earth. It was a journey that would take 3 days at the spacecraft's maximum speed. 3 days to travel through the cold darkness of space, 3 days to escape, 3 days to hope that they might actually survive. But in those 3 days, something else was happening. Marcus Chin was still at the Arctic Research Station. After the spacecraft launched, the Krenathi ships had recovered from the electromagnetic pulse. It took them 20 minutes to restore their systems. Then they detected what had happened. The dragons were gone. The electromagnetic pulse had covered their escape route. The Krenathi commander, a being called Vex who was tall and thin with gray skin and 4 arms, was furious. The Krenathi ships descended toward the station with anger and determination. They landed with enough force to shake the entire facility. Then Krenathi soldiers began entering the station, searching through every room and every corridor. They found the heated chamber where the dragons had rested. They found the computer records showing how Marcus had helped them. And then they found Marcus himself, sitting calmly in the communications room. Commander Vex entered the room with 4 guards. The commander was an intimidating figure, but Marcus had faced intimidating people before. He had trained soldiers. He had fought in wars. He did not show fear. "Where are they?" Vex demanded. The commander's voice was harsh and cold, like metal scraping against stone. "Gone," Marcus said simply. "They escape. You will not find them." Vex's forearms clenched into fists. "You have interfered with Krenethi military operations. You have harbored enemy fugitives. These are acts of war against our species. You will tell us where they have gone or you will die." Marcus looked at the commander with tired eyes. He had seen enough death in his life. He had caused death. He had witnessed death. But he did not regret helping the dragons. "I will not tell you," he said. "And you will not catch them. They are already too far away." Vex turned to one of the guards and gave an order in a harsh, clicking language that Marcus did not understand. The guards grabbed Marcus and held him firmly. They began to prepare for his execution. They had no interest in keeping him alive or questioning him further. To the Krenethi, Marcus was simply an obstacle that needed to be removed. But then something unexpected happened. The communication system of the research station suddenly came alive. A signal penetrated through all of the Krenethi's defenses and filled every speaker in the facility. It was a quantum-encrypted message, which meant it was nearly impossible to intercept or block. The message came from the small spacecraft that was now 3 light-years away. The message was broadcast in perfect English, translated from Valerian harmonic language. It was Iris's voice, and she was speaking to all of human civilization. She told the story of the Valorians and their dying homeworld. She explained how Marcus Chin had helped them when he had every reason not to. She described the Krenethi's persecution and their hunt across the galaxy. And then she made a direct appeal to humanity. "Your species showed us kindness when we expected cruelty," Iris's translated voice said. "You sent one of your warriors to help us, not for payment or power but simply because it was right. Now we ask for your help. Send your ships. Save Marcus Chin. Make an alliance with us. Show the galaxy that humanity is different. Show them that your species values loyalty and compassion." The message ended, but it had already been recorded and transmitted to every human communication network on Earth and in human space colonies. Within minutes, Earth Command was receiving alerts. Within an hour, the highest leaders of human government were having emergency meetings. A human had been taken by an alien military force. A human had sacrificed himself to help refugees. This was the first contact situation that every government had been preparing for. Commander Vex was shocked. He had not expected this. The Krenethi were accustomed to operating in secrecy, hunting down refugees without anyone knowing or caring. But now the entire human species knew what was happening. The Krenethi could not simply execute Marcus without consequences. However, Vex made a decision that would prove to be a mistake. He decided to proceed with the execution anyway. He believed that destroying the evidence would be better than allowing Marcus to be rescued. He gave the final order to his guards. But before they could carry out the command, alarms began screaming throughout the Krenethi ships. Human vessels were appearing in the Arctic airspace. Not just 1 or 2 but an entire human battle fleet, hastily assembled and deployed at emergency speed from the nearest human military base. The humans were coming to rescue their soldier. The first attack came from human fighter jets. They were smaller and less advanced than the Krenethi ships, but there were many of them and they moved with coordinated precision. The Krenethi ships were forced to defend themselves. They could not focus on executing Marcus. Instead they had to prepare for battle. In the chaos and confusion of combat, the guards holding Marcus were distracted. Marcus, the old soldier with 20 years of military training, saw his opportunity. He moved with speed and efficiency that surprised everyone. He broke free from the guards and ran deeper into the station. He hid in a maintenance tunnel, listening to the sounds of battle above him. The human ships fought the Krenethi ships in a desperate struggle over the Arctic. It was a battle between an ancient military force and a young species defending one of their own. The outcome was uncertain, but Marcus knew that his sacrifice had not been wasted. The dragons were safe. They were already too far away to be caught. And that was enough. The battle over the Arctic lasted for 3 hours. Human fighter jets attacked the Krenethi ships with missiles and energy weapons. The Krenethi responded with their superior firepower and advanced technology. But the humans had something the Krenethi did not expect. They had motivation. They were fighting to save one of their own. They were fighting for honor and loyalty, concepts that the Krenethi military did not fully understand. Slowly, the human forces began to gain the advantage. The Krenethi ships, damaged and outnumbered, realized they could not win this battle. Commander Vex made a decision. He ordered his fleet to retreat. As the Krenethi ships lifted off from the Arctic station and accelerated toward space, the human forces pursued them for a short distance. But eventually the Krenethi ships escaped into the darkness of space, heading back toward their own territories. When the battle ended, human soldiers entered the Arctic research station. They moved quickly through the corridors searching for Marcus. They found him in the maintenance tunnel, dirty and exhausted but alive. The soldiers treated him with respect. They had heard the story of what he had done. They knew he had sacrificed his safety for alien refugees. They knew he had held the line alone against overwhelming odds. Marcus was taken to a human medical facility. He was checked for injuries and given food and water. The military doctors told him he was in good health, considering what he had been through. Then representatives from Earth's government arrived to interview him. They wanted to know everything. They wanted to understand every detail about the Valorians, their technology, their situation, and why Marcus had helped them. Marcus told them everything. He described the dragons' appearance, their intelligence, and their desperate need for shelter. He explained about the Krenethi persecution and the dying Valorian homeworld. He showed them the translated conversations he had recorded. He told them about the coordinates where the dragons were heading. He held nothing back. The government representatives listened carefully. They took notes. They recorded everything. Then they made a decision that shocked Marcus. Instead of punishing him for his unauthorized first contact and his destruction of government property, they offered him something entirely different. "You have done something remarkable," the senior representative said. His name was Director Harris, and he had traveled all the way from Earth to meet Marcus in person. "You have established the first meaningful contact between humanity and an advanced alien species. You have created an alliance based on trust and mutual respect. This is something that governments have been trying to achieve for decades." Marcus did not know what to say. He had expected to be court-martialed. He had expected to face military trials and punishment. But instead the government was praising him. "We have a proposal for you," Director Harris continued. "The Valorian ship has reached a human space station. The dragons transmitted their story to every human colony in Earth government. Humanity has voted unanimously to offer the Valorians refuge. We are going to help them rebuild their civilization. And we need someone to represent us to them. Someone they trust. Someone who has already sacrificed everything to help them." Marcus understood what Harris was suggesting. "You want me to be an ambassador?" Marcus said. "We want you to be Earth's ambassador to the Valorian Refugee Coalition," Harris said. "You will travel to meet them. You will help establish trade agreements, cultural exchanges, and mutual defense treaties. You will be the bridge between our two species. It will be dangerous work and it will be difficult. But you are the only human they will trust completely." Marcus thought about the three dragons. He thought about Iris's gentle touch on his shoulder before the spacecraft launched. He thought about the promise he had made, even though he had never expected to keep it. He had told Iris that he would follow them. Now he was being given the chance. "I accept," Marcus said. 3 months later, Marcus was aboard a diplomatic vessel heading toward the coordinates where the Valorian ship had stopped. The ship was large and well-equipped, carrying gifts from Earth, technology, scientific data, and cultural artifacts. It also carried 20 diplomats, scientists, and military officers who would help establish formal relations with the Valorians. As the ship approached the rendezvous point, Marcus stood at the main window watching space grow larger around them. He was nervous. He was excited. He was uncertain about what would happen next. After 20 years of military service and 3 years of isolation, his life had suddenly become complicated again. Then the communication system crackled to life. A familiar harmonic sound filled the bridge. The computer translated Iris's voice into English. "Marcus Chin, you kept your promise. You have come to us. We are grateful." Marcus felt tears in his eyes. "I told you I would follow," he said into the communication system. "I told you I would not abandon you. You held the line for us," Iris said, and her words were translated with perfect clarity. "Now we will hold it for you. Humanity has found its place among the stars. Not through conquest or violence, but through one tired old soldier who chose compassion when he could have chosen indifference. Your species will always have a friend in us." The two ships moved closer together in the darkness of space. Humans and Valorians prepared to meet as equals, as friends, as allies. Marcus Chin, the burned-out military veteran who had wanted nothing but solitude and peace, had become the bridge between worlds. Years passed. The alliance between humanity and the Valorians grew stronger. Trade flourished. Knowledge was shared. The Valorians helped humanity understand technologies that would have taken centuries to develop. Humans helped the Valorians rebuild their civilization and their hope. The Arctic Research Station became a historical monument. The heated chamber where the dragons had rested became a place of pilgrimage. Humans and Valorians traveled there together to remember the moment when everything changed. They built sculptures and wrote stories about the day that 3 frozen dragons asked a human veteran for shelter, and he said yes. Marcus grew old in the service of peace. He trained new ambassadors. He wrote books about his experiences. He became a symbol of what could happen when one person chose kindness over protocol. When Marcus finally retired at the age of 70, both human and Valerian governments honored him with medals and celebrations. But the thing that mattered most to Marcus happened on his final day as ambassador. Iris, still alive and healthy after all those years, came to see him personally. The old dragon made her harmonic sounds, and the computer translated them one last time. "You saved us," Iris said. "You saved not just 3 dragons but an entire species. You taught us that the universe still contains goodness. You taught us that hope is not foolish. Thank you, Marcus Chin. You will never be forgotten."